The ancient mesa stood silent witness as Torquay knelt beside the crumpled form. Blood-caked hair obscured her face, but the shallow rise and fall of her chest told him life remained. His calloused hands, once instruments of war, now hovered uncertainly above her broken body. The wind carried whispers of his ancestors, urging him to remember the healing ways. Though his own heart lay shattered from the massacre of his family, something in her quiet suffering called to him. He had wandered these lands for 3 seasons, a ghost among the living, seeking only solitude in his grief. Now, as the setting sun painted the desert in crimson and gold, Torquil made his choice. Could 2 broken spirits, like pottery shards, carefully rejoined, create something stronger than what was lost? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Torque gently lifted the woman onto his horse, careful not to disturb her wounds. The small medicine pouch at his hip swayed with each movement, containing the precious herbs his grandfather had taught him to gather under the full moon. His fingers traced the worn leather, remembering the old man's hands guiding his own. A warrior protects with weapons, his grandfather had said, but a healer saves with knowledge. You must be both, my son. Now, 3 seasons since the soldiers had come, since the screams of his family had echoed through the village, since he alone had survived by being away hunting. These teachings were all he had left. The medicine pouch, passed through 5 generations, now hung heavy with responsibility. Tisa Wigai, his white speckled horse, moved carefully beneath the double burden. The woman's breathing remained shallow but steady. Dried blood caked her skin, and bruises in various stages of healing told a story of prolonged suffering. Her clothes, once finely decorated with traditional beadwork, hung in tatters as they climbed the hidden path to his mesa dwelling. Memories threatened to drown him. The last time he had carried someone this way, it had been his young nephew, injured while learning to ride. The boy's laughter had turned to screams weeks later when the soldiers came. The mesa offered protection through its natural barriers, a steep approach easily defended, caves that provided shelter, a hidden spring that guaranteed water, and ancient petroglyphs that reminded him he was not the first to seek sanctuary here. His people had used this place for generations, though few knew of it now. Torque had claimed the largest cave as his dwelling. Inside, a small fire pit, sleeping mats of woven yucca, clay pots for water, and drying herbs hanging from the ceiling created a sparse but functional home. He laid the woman gently on his own sleeping mat, noticing how her face, despite the injuries, carried a quiet dignity. He retrieved water and began the careful process of cleaning her wounds. The bruises around her neck suggested strangulation. A poorly healed break in her arm had left it slightly bent. As he worked, he spoke, softly, not to her, but to the spirits of his ancestors. Guide my hands. Show me the way to heal what has been broken. From his medicine pouch, he extracted dried yarrow for the open wounds, arnica for the bruises, and willow bark to brew a tea for pain. The familiar rituals of healing brought him a strange comfort. For months, he had moved like a ghost across the landscape, hunting only when necessary, speaking to no one. Now his hands remembered their purpose. Night fell as he worked. The woman remained unconscious, though she occasionally murmured words he couldn't understand, a dialect similar to his own, but with different inflections. Perhaps from a northern band. When the fire burned low, he found himself studying her face in the flickering light. Who was she? What violence had befallen her? And why had fate placed her in his path? I have no answers for you, he whispered, realizing it was the first time he had spoken aloud to another person since the massacre. But you will not die tonight. Not if I can prevent it. He placed a protective circle of sage around her sleeping form, then moved to the cave entrance. Stars punctuated the vast desert sky, unchanged despite the chaos of human suffering below. T.C. Wig-Eye grazed contentedly nearby, occasionally lifting his head to watch for danger. Torque settled against the rock wall, knife in hand, prepared to maintain his vigil until dawn. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The woman would either wake or journey to the spirit world. Either way, he had made his choice. After months of isolation, he had brought another's fate into his hands. The thought terrified him more than any battle ever had. Dawn painted the mesa walls gold when Torque noticed the change in the woman's breathing. He had kept vigil through the night, periodically checking her fever and replacing the cool cloths on her forehead. Now he watched as her eyelids fluttered, then opened. The reaction was immediate. Her eyes widened in terror, and despite her injuries, she pushed herself backward until she hit the cave wall, a small cry of pain escaping her lips. "Be still," Torque said softly in Apache. "You will reopen your wounds." The woman's eyes darted around the cave, assessing exits, threats, possibilities. Her breathing came in short, panicked bursts. Torque remained where he was, making no move toward her. He recognized the look of cornered prey. He had worn it himself. "I found you by the dry riverbed," he explained, keeping his voice even. "You are safe here." She said nothing, but her eyes fixed on the medicine pouch at his waist. "You know this?" he asked, touching the pouch. "I am a healer. Or I was, before ... He stopped himself. His story was not important now. The silence stretched between them until Torque rose slowly. "I will prepare food." As he moved about the cave gathering supplies, he felt her eyes tracking his every movement. From the corner of his eye, he noticed her examining her own bandaged wounds with a healer's critical assessment, while preparing a simple stew of dried meat and wild onions. Torque found his hands reaching for a broken pottery bowl he had discovered weeks earlier. The clay vessel, decorated with traditional patterns, had been shattered, its pieces scattered. He had gathered the fragments, intending to repair it as his grandmother had taught him, but had never found the purpose. Now, as the stew simmered, he began fitting the pieces together, using pine resin to hold them. The work required focus and patience, qualities he had abandoned in his grief. The woman watched silently. When the stew was ready, he filled a whole bowl and placed it near her, then retreated to give her space. She did not touch it until he turned his attention back to the broken pottery. "Na cod," she finally said, her voice rough from disuse. Torque looked up. The word was familiar, but pronounced differently in her dialect. "The bowl," she continued, pointing to the broken pieces in his hands. "It will hold water again?" "Perhaps," he replied, "if the breaks are clean and my hands are patient." She nodded slightly, then winced at the movement. As with bodies, she murmured, "It was the opening he needed. You know the healing ways?" A shadow passed over her face. "My mother was medicine. Woman, I was learning." Torque nodded, understanding what remained unspoken. Her mother was gone now. The woman's eyes drifted to the herbs hanging from the cave ceiling. "Tabuichi," she said, identifying the red grass used for fever. "Yes," Torque confirmed. "And Kohash for women's pain, yarrow for wounds." Something in her posture relaxed slightly at the familiar words. She took a small sip of the stew. "I am called Torque," he offered. For a long moment he thought she would not respond. Then, barely audible, "Noya." As the day progressed, Torque continued his work on the broken bowl, while Noya drifted between wakefulness and sleep. The fever returned by afternoon, and he prepared fresh medicine. This time, when he approached with a water skin, she did not flinch away. "Drink," he instructed, holding it out. Their fingers brushed as she accepted it, the first voluntary contact. In that brief touch, Torque felt something shift between them. Not trust, not yet, but possibility. Outside, the desert heat shimmered across the landscape. Inside the cool cave, two broken people began the slow work of reassembling what remained of their lives, piece by careful piece. The third morning dawned with unfamiliar sound, a distant brassy note carried on the wind. Torque, sorting herbs outside the cave entrance, froze. His hand instinctively moved to the knife at his belt. The cavalry bugle called again, closer this time. Inside the cave, Noya bolted upright from her sleep mat, eyes wide with terror. Their gazes met across the distance different wounds. Same. Fear. Inda, Torque said softly, soldiers. He moved with practiced efficiency, gathering essential supplies into a small pack. 3 water skins, dried meat, the medicine pouch. His movements betrayed military precision, the motions of a man who had fled with only moments' notice before. Noya struggled to her feet, swaying slightly. "They hunt me," she said, her voice barely audible. Torque paused. "Why?" Her eyes darted to the small bundle of her tattered clothing. "I took something. When I escaped." Another bugle call, this time accompanied by the distant drumming of hooves. The soldiers were sweeping the valley below. "There is another cave," Torque said. "Higher up, more difficult to see." He assessed Noya's condition with a healer's eye. Her injuries had improved, but she could not climb quickly or quietly. "I must carry you." For a moment, pride warred with necessity on her face. Then she nodded once. Torque moved to his lookout point, scanning the terrain below. A dust cloud marked the cavalry's position, still distant, but moving methodically in their direction. 8 riders, standard patrol formation. "They have Apache scouts with them," he observed, noting the riding style of 2 figures at the column's edges. "Traitors," Noya spat, the word heavy with bitterness. Torque turned to her. "What did you take from them?" Noya's hands trembled slightly as she reached into her clothing and extracted a small folded paper. "Names, places, their plans for our people." Understanding dawned on Torque. No wonder they hunted her. Such information was worth more than gold to the scattered Apache bands still evading capture. Another bugle call, closer still. They had no more time. Torque gathered the last essential items, then knelt before Noya. "Arms around my neck," he instructed. Her body tensed at the proximity, but she complied. He lifted her carefully, feeling the unnatural thinness of her frame, the heat of fever still lingering in her skin. They moved through a narrow passage at the back of the main cave, climbing upward through the mesa's natural chimney. Noya's breath came in controlled gasps against his ear, pain suppressed through sheer will. The higher cave was smaller, darker, but offered a defensive position with a commanding view of the approaches. Torque settled Noya against the wall, then returned to the cave mouth, watching as the cavalry patrol entered the valley below. "They are searching systematically," he observed. "They know you are wounded. They know you could not have gone far." Noya's voice came from the shadows behind him. At the collection point, there were many women, children too, separated from fathers, brothers, husbands. Her words emerged haltingly. "They spoke freely around us, thinking we did not understand. Their language. I listened. I remembered." Torque turned to face her. In the filtered light, her eyes held a fire that transcended her physical weakness. "They plan to move all Apache to the southern territories," she continued, "away from ancestral lands. Those who resist will not be taken alive." The gravity of her words hung between them. Below, the patrol began ascending the mesa path. "If they find us," Torque said quietly, "I will ensure you are not taken again." The meaning was clear. Death before capture. Noya held his gaze, unwavering. "An eye for you, warrior." In that moment, something shifted between them, a covenant born of shared danger, They would survive together, or not at all. Hours passed in tense silence. Torque remained motionless at the cave entrance, watching the soldiers methodically search the lower areas of the mesa. Their voices occasionally drifted upward terse commands, frustrated curses. The Apache scouts moved with disturbing familiarity. Through the landscape, reading signs Torque had thought well-concealed by midday, the patrol had searched the main cave, finding evidence of recent occupation. Their search intensified, but the narrow passage to the upper cave remained undiscovered, a secret known only to Torque's band for generations. As the sun began its westward descent, the cavalry commander finally called for withdrawal. Torque watched them descend the mesa, their movements betraying reluctance and irritation rather than defeat. "They will return," he said softly. Noya nodded, her face drawn with exhaustion from the hours of silent vigilance. "Rest," Torque told her. "I will scout when they are gone." She did not argue, a measure of her fatigue. As she drifted into uneasy sleep, Torque prepared himself. He removed his knife and most of his clothing, retaining only a loincloth. Without weapons or provisions, if captured, he might be mistaken for a simple gatherer rather than a warrior or fugitive. When the patrol disappeared beyond the distant ridge, he descended the mesa using a different route, moving from shadow to shadow with practiced stealth. The cooling air against his skin reminded him of night raids in the time before, when he had been counted among the most skilled warriors of his band. He found the cavalry's trail. Easily enough 8 horses, and 2 Apache scouts on foot had left clear signs. Following at a distance, he tracked them to their temporary camp 3 miles west. From his vantage point among the rocks, he observed their routine guards posted, horses picketed, fire built. Ordinary precautions of men who believed themselves hunters rather than hunted. As full darkness fell, the camp settled. Torque circled closer. 2 soldiers remained on watch, while the others slept. The Apache scouts sat apart, speaking quietly. In their dialect, a flicker of movement caught his eye. One of the scouts moving toward the scrubby brush to relieve himself. Torque heralded his movement, silent as breath. When the scout finished his business and turned back toward camp, Torque had already melted away. His circuit of reconnaissance complete, he began his return to the mesa. A glint of white against the dark ground made him pause. Paper a sheet that had blown from the soldiers' camp. He retrieved it carefully. Dawn was breaking when Torque returned to the upper cave. Noya was awake, her eyes questioning. "They have made camp to the west," he reported. "They will search again tomorrow." He unfolded the paper. He had found a map, marked with military precision. Red circles indicated known Apache encampments. Blue lines showed patrol routes, and black crosses marked locations labeled collection points. Noya's fingers traced the markings. "This shows all the territory between here and the northern mountains," she said. "Each circle is a band of our people who do not know what awaits them." Torque studied the map with a strategist's eye. "This patrol is part of a larger operation. They are closing a net around all who remain free." Their eyes met in silent understanding. The danger was greater than either had realized. "I know. These mountains," Noya said, pointing to a northern range. "My mother's people had a hidden canyon there. It might still be safe." Torque considered this information. "How far?" 10 days' journey, perhaps more with my injuries." "We cannot stay here," Torque decided. "They will bring more soldiers, search more thoroughly." For the first time, they shared a meal side by side rather than across the cave from each other, a small but significant shift. As they ate dried meat and gathered berries, they spoke of routes, water sources, dangers. "You are strong enough to travel?" he asked. Noya single quotes S chin lifted slightly. "I will be." That night, under a blanket of stars, Torque spoke of his family's massacre for the first time. Just a few words, but the dam had cracked. Noya listened in silence, offering no empty comfort, only the gift of witness. In return, she shared a fragment of her own story capture: confinement, escape. The words hung between them, creating a bridge of shared suffering and resilience. A week passed before they dared begin their journey north. Each day, Torque guided Noya through exercises he had learned in warrior training, movements to rebuild strength in damaged muscles, breathing techniques to manage pain. Her determination impressed him. Despite wincing, she never complained, pushing herself harder than he would have demanded. The morning, she walked unassisted to the small spring near their cave. Torque felt an unfamiliar sensation in his chest. Lightning he could not name. Good was all he said, but something in his tone made Noya look up. The corner of her mouth lifted slightly, not quite a smile, but the closest he had seen. That evening, as Torque prepared a rabbit he had snared, Noya reached into the small bundle of her possessions and withdrew an object she had kept hidden. Until now a bone comb, its teeth remarkably intact, its handle carved with symbols of her mother's band. "She made this when I became a woman," Noya said quietly, running her fingers over the intricate carvings. "From the leg bone of an elk my father had hunted. She said a woman's hair carries her spirit and should be tended with respect." Torque watched as she attempted to draw the comb through her tangled hair, her movements hampered by weakness and the awkward angle of her injured arm. After a moment's hesitation, he spoke. "Among my people, warriors sometimes assist those wounded in battle with such tasks." He paused. "If you would permit." The request hung between them, weighted with meaning beyond the simple words. Caring for another's hair was an intimate act, typically reserved for family or close companions. Noya studied him, her dark eyes unreadable. Then, with deliberate movement, she extended the comb. Torque set aside the rabbit and moved to sit behind her. With careful hands, he began working through the tangles, starting at the ends as he had seen his mother do for his sisters. Neither spoke as he methodically smoothed each section, revealing the glossy black beneath weeks of dust and neglect. "My youngest sister wore her hair in 2 braids, he said unexpectedly, a memory surfacing without warning. "She was 14 when the soldiers came." Noya remained still beneath his hands. "My mother wore hers in a single plait down her back," she replied softly. "Even when fever took her, I combed it each day until the end." The simple exchange of memories created something new between them, not just shared present danger, but shared past joy and pain. With her hair finally smooth, Torque returned the comb. Their fingers brushed, lingering a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you," she said, the words carrying more weight than their simplicity suggested. Later, as they ate beside the small fire, Noya asked about the plants that grew around the mesa. Torque described each one, their medicinal properties, the best times for harvesting. Her knowledge complemented his, sometimes offering different uses from her band's traditions. "My mother made a tea from yucca flowers for stomach ailments," she said, but she added crushed juniper berries. "My grandfather used juniper for fever dreams," Torque replied. "He would say the spirits of the trees drive away the spirits of sickness." "And did they?" Noya asked. "He lived to see 90 summers," Torque answered. Then, unexpectedly, he found himself chuckling at a memory of his grandfather, dancing vigorously at a celebration. Despite his advanced age, the sound of his own laughter startled him. It had been so long since anything had brought him joy that the sensation felt almost foreign. Noya watched him, something warming in her expression. "Your grandfather sounds like a wise man." "He was," Torque agreed, the ache of loss present, but somehow less consuming than before. "He would have liked you." The words emerged without thought, but once spoken, he knew them to be true. His grandfather had valued strength of spirit above all else, and Noya had that in abundance. That night, as cavalry patrols searched the valleys below, Torque made his decision. Tomorrow they would begin the journey north, whatever the risks. Staying meant certain discovery. Moving meant hope slim, perhaps, but real Dot, as if sensing his thoughts, Noya spoke from her side of the fire. "I am ready." Torque nodded, meeting her gaze across the flames. "Then we go at first light." 2 weeks after finding Noya by the riverbed, Torque returned from hunting to find her sitting cross-legged at the cave entrance, something long and slender held carefully in her hands. His flute and instrument he had tucked away in a crevice. Months ago, unable to bear the memories it carried, he stopped in his tracks, the fresh rabbit forgotten in his grip. "I was gathering your things for the journey," Noya explained, her fingers tracing the polished cedar surface. It was hidden in the rock. Torque approached slowly, his eyes fixed on the flute. His father had carved it for him when he had completed his first successful hunt, decorating the instrument with symbols of protection and strength. On nights before battle, Torque had played to center his spirit, the music carrying prayers to ancestors for guidance. "It is finely made," Noya said, offering it to him. "The wood speaks well." He accepted it with reluctance, the familiar weight stirring memories he had tried to bury. "My father's work," he said simply. Noya watched him, her healer's eyes seeing more than he wished to reveal. It has been silent too long. The observation hung between them, laden with meaning beyond the flute itself. Torque placed the instrument carefully on a rock and began preparing the rabbit, his movements more brusque than usual. Some songs are better left unsung. They worked in silence, falling into the rhythm they had established. He skinned and cleaned the meat. She prepared herbs and roots she had gathered. The efficiency of their partnership had grown with each passing day, words becoming less necessary. As night settled around them and the rabbit cooked over the fire, Noya spoke again. "In my band, music helped the sick find their way back to health. My mother said it reminds the spirit why it wishes to remain in this world." Torque stared into the flames. And what if the spirit no longer wishes to remain? The question emerged unbidden, exposing a truth he had not acknowledged even to himself. Noya did not answer immediately. When she did, her voice carried the weight of hard-won wisdom. "Then perhaps it needs a new reason." She rose carefully and retrieved the flute, placing it beside him before returning to her side of the fire. The meal passed in contemplative silence. After, as stars emerged in the vast desert sky, Torque found his fingers moving to the flute of their own accord. The first notes emerged hesitantly, like a voice unused to speaking. The simple hunting melody his father had taught him first. A boy's song. His fingers remembered the patterns, though his mind tried to resist. The music drifted into the night air, mingling with the crackling fire and distant cry of a hunting owl. Memories flowed with the melody, his father's proud smile, his mother's gentle hands, his sister's laughter, his nephew's eager questions. The pain of their loss rose sharp and clear, no longer dulled by the protective numbness he had cultivated. Across the fire, Noya sat with eyes closed, tears tracking silently down her face. Her grief mirrored his own, different in its particulars, but the same in its essence. Loss recognized loss. The final note hung in the air between them, fading slowly into the night. "My mother sang while she worked," Noya said softly, her voice slightly hoarse. "I had forgotten the sound until now." Torque nodded, understanding. Music unlocked memories, painful yet precious. "My youngest sister was learning this song when—" He stopped, unable to complete the thought. "Then she hears you play it now," Noya said with simple certainty. "The ancestors are always listening." The comfort in her words reached something long frozen within him. Not healing, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of a thaw. They sat incompanionable. Silence as the fire burned low, the shared experience creating a new layer of connection between them. When Noya finally rose to sleep, she paused beside him. 3 days, she said. We begin our journey in 3 days. It was not a question, but a statement of readiness and determination. Torque nodded, recognizing that she had assessed her own strength and found it sufficient. 3 days, he agreed. That night, for the first time since the massacre, his dreams were not of blood and fire, but of wind carrying music across desert plains. The final days before departure brought a flurry of activity. Torque and Noya worked side by side preparing for the journey north, their movements increasingly synchronized, anticipating each other's needs with growing familiarity. We need a parfleche, Torque said on the second morning, referring to the traditional rawhide carrying case used by their people for generations. The medicine will not survive the journey without protection. He produced a deer hide he had been curing, spreading it on the ground outside the cave. The process of creating a parfleche was methodical measuring, cutting, folding, and securing with sinew thread. Torque worked with practiced precision, his hands remembering skills passed down through generations. Noya sat nearby, sorting herbs and grinding some into powders for easier transport. She watched his technique with interest. Your fold is different, she observed. In my band, we turn the corners inward first, then bind the sides. Torque paused, considering. Show me. She moved beside him, her shoulder nearly touching his, as she demonstrated the alternative method. This creates a stronger water seal at the corners, but may weaken the center over time, he countered, showing his technique. Each has purpose. They debated the merits of their respective traditions, eventually agreeing to incorporate elements of both his central structure with their corner technique. The resulting parfleche was neither fully his way nor hers, but something new born of their combined knowledge. As they worked, conversation flowed more easily than before. Noya described the Northern Territory's high country with pine forests and hidden valleys. There is a canyon my mother showed me as a child, she explained, sheltered from winter winds, with a hot spring that never freezes. Few know of its existence. The cavalry has Apache scouts, Torque reminded her. What one Apache knows, others might also know. Noya's expression darkened. Not this place. It was sacred to my mother's lineage alone. She showed me only because I was the last. The significance of her words hung between them, the last of her line, as he was perhaps the last of his. We should avoid the main trails, Torque said, turning their discussion to practical matters. Even with the map, we cannot know where all patrols might be, but we must cross the flat lands to reach the mountains, Noya countered, pointing to a section of the crude map he had drawn in the dirt. There is little cover there. Their first real disagreement emerged as they debated routes. Torque favored the longer path skirting the foothills, while Noya argued for a more direct approach, traveling by night across the exposed terrain. Your strength may not last through a long detour, she pointed out. Your injuries may slow us in terrain that requires speed. He responded. The tension between them was not anger, but the natural friction of two minds with different approaches. After mutual consideration, they settled on compromise, a middle path that balanced their concerns. That evening, as stars emerged, they sat outside the cave for the last time. The parfleche rested between them, filled with provisions and medicines, a tangible symbol of their shared purpose. My grandfather taught that stars are the campfires of ancestors, Torque said, breaking the comfortable silence. Each light, a soul watching over us. Noya followed his gaze upward. We call that cluster the Seven Sisters, she said, pointing to a constellation. They guide lost travelers home. We name it the Deer Hunters, Torque replied. See the bow there, and the fallen deer? They traded star names into the night, discovering shared patterns with different stories, a bridge between their separate traditions. Tomorrow we leave this place, Noya said finally, her voice carrying a note of solemnity. Torge nodded, surveying the mesa that had been his sanctuary. It has served its purpose. Neither spoke the deeper truth that the cave had witnessed, a transformation in them both. What had begun as mere survival had evolved into something more purposeful. They would depart not as they had arrived, a hollow shell of grief, she broken and near death, but as something stronger, if not yet. Whole, sleep, Torque said gently. The journey begins at first light. Noya rose, then paused, looking back at him. Thank you, she said simply, for finding me by the river. The words carried the weight of all that had passed between them, and all that might yet come. They departed at dawn, descending the mesa, by a seldom-used path that left minimal traces of their passage. Torque led the way, T.C. Wigai following with their carefully packed supplies. Noya walked unaided, though Torque noted how she conserved her strength. Moving with deliberate economy, the first day's journey took them through familiar territory, Torque's hunting grounds of recent months. By midday, the heat had intensified, the sun beating down mercilessly on the exposed terrain. Noya's pace slowed, though she made no complaint. There is shade ahead, Torque said, pointing to a stand of juniper trees, marking the boundary between desert and foothill country. They rested briefly in the dappled shadows, sharing water and dried meat. Noya's face showed strain, but her eyes remained clear and determined. We have made good distance, she observed, studying the path behind them. The mesa was already a diminishing silhouette on the horizon. Torque nodded, impressed by her endurance. Many warriors would have demanded rest hours earlier, by late afternoon. They had entered unfamiliar country, a transition zone, where Torque's mental map grew less certain. The landscape changed subtly, rocky outcroppings giving way to rolling, hills covered with scrub brush and occasional stands of pinyon pine. Water will be scarce here, he noted, consulting the military map they had found. It showed major water sources, but lacked detail on smaller springs or seasonal streams. Noya studied the terrain ahead. The birds circle there, she said, pointing to distant specks wheeling in the sky. Perhaps water. Torque hadn't noticed the birds, a testament to her keen observation despite fatigue. They adjusted their course accordingly. As dusk approached, the temperature dropped rapidly, a reminder of desert extremes. Noya's steps had grown uneven, though she pushed forward without complaint. We make camp soon, Torque decided, searching for suitable shelter. The bird-marked location revealed a surprise, a small spring bubbling from between rocks, creating a modest pool before disappearing again into the earth. The water was clear and cool, a treasure in the arid landscape. How did you know? Torque asked as they gratefully filled their water skins. My mother taught me to read the land, Noya replied. Birds circle water at dusk. Certain plants grow, only with steady moisture. She indicated a cluster of reeds at the pool's edge. These speak of water that remains even in dry seasons. Torque felt a newfound respect for her knowledge. His skills lay in hunting, tracking, warfare, but hers complemented these with understanding of subtler patterns. They established camp in a sheltered hollow near the spring. After a simple meal, Noya approached the water again, carrying her bone comb. I would wash, she said, her tone both statement and request for privacy. Torque nodded, moving to higher ground to stand watch while she attended to her needs. Orange glow of sunset painted the landscape in warm hues, softening the harsh contours of rock and scrub. From his position, he could see for miles in every direction. No dust clouds of cavalry patrols, no telltale smoke of campfires as darkness settled. A sound reached him, soft singing in the Apache tongue. Noya's voice carried gently on the evening air, a song of cleansing and renewal. The melody was unfamiliar, but the sentiment universal gratitude for water, for another day of life, for safe passage. Torque remained still, not wishing to interrupt. this private ritual. Her voice gained strength as the song progressed. No longer the whisper of a wounded woman, but the clear tones of someone reclaiming herself. When the singing ended, he waited a respectful time before returning to camp. Noya sat by their small fire, her damp hair combed smooth, her face composed but somehow lighter. "You have a good voice," he said simply. "It has been long silent," she replied, echoing his earlier words about the flute. They sat uncomfortable. Silence as stars emerged overhead. Finally, Noya spoke again, her voice soft but steady. "My family died of sickness brought by white settlers," she said, 5 winters ago. "First my father and brothers, then my sister's children. My mother lasted, longest, tending others, until she too fell ill." Torque listened without interruption, recognizing the rare gift of her trust. "I alone survived," she finished. "Sometimes I wonder why the spirits chose me." "Perhaps they saw your strength," Torquig suggested, his voice equally soft. "Or perhaps they had not finished with me yet," Noya replied, looking into the fire. "As they have not finished with you." The third day of their journey brought more challenging terrain, a series of steep ridges that forced them to pick their way carefully. T.C. Wigai proved his worth, finding secure footing on treacherous slopes. By midday, even Torque felt the strain in his legs and back. "We rest here," he decided as they reached a relatively flat area. The worst terrain lies ahead. They shared a meal of dried berries and pemmican, rationing their supplies with careful precision. Neither mentioned the obvious Noya's strength was improving daily, but not quickly enough for the pace they needed to maintain Dot as they prepared to continue. Torque spotted something unusual on the ground. Near his foot, a single eagle feather, its black and white pattern unmistakable. Both he and Noya reached for it simultaneously, their hands meeting over the precious object. They looked at each other in momentary surprise. Then Torque withdrew his hand. "You saw it first," he acknowledged. Shook her head. "It was meant for both our eyes." The finding of an eagle feather was never considered accidental among their people. Eagles were messengers between worlds, their feathers carriers of powerful medicine. "My grandfather would say, 'This is a sign from the ancestors,'" Torque said, studying the perfect feather. "A blessing on our path." "Or a warning," Noya added. "Eagle medicine can guide or caution." They considered the terrain ahead, then the feather again. "The pattern speaks," Noya observed, tracing the distinctive black and white sections. "See how the dark meets light here, forming a fork? Like a path dividing." Torque studied it closely. "You read signs as my grandmother did." He looked up at the ridge they had been planning to cross. "Perhaps we should consider a different route." They consulted the military map again, identifying an alternative path that curved around rather than over the highest ridge. It would add distance, but might offer safer passage. "The eagle sees what we cannot," Noya said, carefully securing the feather in her hair. "We would be wise to heed its message." The decision made, they altered course. The new route soon revealed. Its wisdom a game trail wound through the lower elevations. Easier for both T.C. Wigai and Noya to navigate Dot by late afternoon. They came upon an unexpected sight, an abandoned pioneer wagon, its canvas cover weathered and torn, one wheel broken beyond repair. The remains had clearly been there for some time. Partially reclaimed by desert-growth Dot, they approached cautiously, Torque scanning for signs of recent human presence. Finding none, he examined the wagon more closely. The contents had been mostly taken or destroyed by weather, but some useful items remained: a coil of rope, metal cooking implements, a small cask that might have held water but now stood empty. "Should we take what we need?" Noya asked, her expression troubled. Torque understood her hesitation. Taking from the dead, even those not of their people, required proper respect and acknowledgement. "My father taught that the dead have no use for physical things," he said. but their spirits may linger where they fell. Noya nodded. We should make an offering first. They gathered small stones, building a simple cairn near the wagon. Noya placed a pinch of sacred herbs atop it, while Torque offered a prayer in their Apache tongue, acknowledging the unknown souls who had perished there and asking permission to use what they had left behind. The ritual complete, they salvaged the most useful items: the rope, a metal pot with lid, and several squares of canvas that could serve multiple purposes. Each object was received with quiet thanks, honored for the continued service it would provide Dot as they made camp that evening. Torque used the new pot to prepare a more substantial meal than they had enjoyed since leaving the mesa. The conversation turned to their lives before the troubles that had befallen them. I was to be joined with a woman from a neighboring band, Torque revealed unexpectedly. She was skilled in pottery making, known for her even temper. It was a good match for our families. What happened? Noya asked. Smallpox took her and her family the winter before we were to be joined. His voice remained steady, this older grief long since absorbed into the fabric of his life. Before I could properly mourn her, I was called to serve as a warrior for our band. Noya nodded understanding. I was training to become like my mother, a healer and keeper of women's medicine. I had completed half the required knowledge when sickness came to our camp. The sky darkened ominously as they crested a ridge on the 5th day of their journey. What had begun as scattered clouds rapidly coalesced into towering thunderheads, purple-black and threatening. Desert storm, Torque observed, scanning the horizon with concern. We need shelter. They quickened their pace, Noya keeping up, admirably despite her still healing injuries. The air grew heavy, charged with electricity. In the distance, lightning forked between cloud and earth, followed by the low rumble of thunder. There, Noya pointed to a rocky outcropping ahead. Might be caves. Torque nodded, leading Tessewi toward the formation. The first fat raindrops began to fall as they reached the rocks, quickly becoming a deluge that reduced visibility to mere feet. A narrow opening in the rock face revealed a shallow cave little more than an indentation, but enough to provide shelter from the driving rain. Torque secured Tessewi in the most protected corner, then helped Noya settle against the dry rock wall. The space was tight, forcing them to sit close together, their shoulders touching. Lightning struck nearby, illuminating the cave in a brief, harsh flash. Thunder followed immediately, a deafening crack that made Noya flinch involuntarily. You fear the thunder beings? Torque asked, noticing her reaction. Noya's expression showed embarrassment. Since childhood. My brother once told me they take disobedient children. Despite the gravity of their situation, Torque felt his lips curve slightly. Brothers tell such tales. Mine convinced me that owl spirits would steal my voice if I spoke after sunset. A particularly violent thunderclap shook small pebbles from the cave ceiling. Noya tensed again, her breathing quickening. My grandfather had a different story about thunder, Torque said, deliberately keeping his voice calm and even. Would you hear it? Noya nodded, visibly trying to master her discomfort. He said the thunder beings are ancient warriors who ride across the sky on cloud horses. Torque began, falling into the storytelling cadence he had learned from the elders. Their voices shake the earth because they call out warnings to protect those below. Their lightning spears strike only that which threatens harmony. As he spoke, the storm raged outside, but Noya's focus remained on his words rather than her fear. When we hear thunder, my grandfather said, we are hearing the ancestors ensure our safety, he continued. They remind the rain not to fall too hard, the wind not to blow too fiercely. They maintain balance. Another lightning strike illuminated Noya's face, her eyes fixed on his, drawing strength from the story. The thunder beings recognize courage, Torque added. They honor those who face difficulty with a strong heart. They do not take children, they protect them. This storytelling created a small pocket of calm amid the storm's fury. Torque found himself sharing more of his grandfather's teachings, legends he had not recalled in years. Noya listened intently, her fear gradually subsiding as the familiar rhythms of tribal knowledge provided comfort. Outside, the storm intensified. Water began streaming past the cave entrance, quickly becoming a torrent that threatened to flood. Their shelter. We must block the flow, Torque said. Reaching for their packs together, they created a makeshift barrier using the canvas salvaged from the wagon. The work required close coordination in the confined space, their bodies necessarily brushing against each other as they secured the barrier. Torque became acutely aware of Noya's presence, the scent of herbs that clung to her hair, the warmth of her skin when their hands touched, the determined set of her jaw as she worked. Something shifted in his perception, seeing her not just as a wounded woman he had rescued, but as a capable partner in their shared struggle. With the barrier in place, they settled back against the cave wall, watching as water diverted around the protected space. The storm showed no signs of abating, the desert sky unleashing months of accumulated moisture in a single overwhelming display. "We may be here until morning," Torque observed. Noya nodded, seeming less troubled by this prospect than by the thunder itself. "Your stories help," she said simply. "My grandfather would be pleased they served their purpose," he replied. He believed stories were medicine for the spirit, as herbs are medicine for the body. "Your grandfather was wise," Noya said. "My mother believes similarly about songs. Will you sing one?" Torque asked. "A song for safe passage through storms?" Noya hesitated, then began a soft melody in their Apache tongue a woman's traveling song, asking for protection and clear paths. Her voice, initially tentative, gained strength as the song progressed. Outside, the storm continued its assault on the desert landscape. Inside the small cave, two people created a different kind of shelter, one built of shared stories, songs, and growing trust. 6 days into their journey, the terrain began to shift toward pine-covered foothills. The air carried a hint of coolness, absent in the desert below. Noya moved with growing confidence, her body remembering strength as they drew closer to her. Ancestral territories. Torque paused suddenly, raising his hand in a silent signal to stop. He crouched, examining the ground before them with intense focus. "Shod horses," he said quietly. "Many of them. Recent." Noya knelt beside him, studying the tracks. "How recent?" "Yesterday. Perhaps the day before." He pointed to distinct markings. "Cavalry formation. 8 riders at least." They exchanged troubled glances. This far north, they had hoped to be beyond the regular patrol routes. "They should not be here," Noya said, her brow furrowing. "This is not their usual territory." Torque surveyed the surrounding landscape, alert to any sign of current danger. "We should move away from their trail, find higher ground to observe." They changed course, leading Tessewigai through a dense stand of pine trees that offered concealment. From a rocky vantage point, they scanned the valley below. No dust clouds betrayed current movement, but the tracks told an unsettling story. As Torque studied the terrain, something caught his eye, a glint of metal among pine needles. He retrieved the object, a brass button from a cavalry uniform, the insignia clearly visible. 7th Cavalry, he identified, his expression darkening. "Known for their ruthlessness against our people." Noya's face had gone pale. She stared at the button as though it were a venomous snake. "What is it?" Torque asked, recognizing true fear in her expression. "That unit," she said, her voice barely audible. "They ran the collection point where I was held." Understanding dawned. "This is not coincidence," Torque said. "They hunt you specifically." Noya's hands trembled slightly as she reached into her clothing, extracting a small folded packet she had kept hidden even from him. Because of this, she unwrapped the cloth covering to reveal a small leather-bound book, an officer's journal. When I escaped, she explained, I took this from the commander's tent. I had seen him writing in it each night after meeting with other officers. Torque stared at the journal, understanding immediately the significance of such a document. This is why they pursue so persistently. Noya nodded. It contains information plans, maps, names, things they would not want known. You risked much to take it, Torque observed, a new respect in his voice. I did not understand its full value then, she admitted. I knew only that it seemed important to them, and therefore might be important to our people. The discovery recontextualized everything. They were not simply fleeing northward to find safety. They were carrying information that might prove vital to the survival of remaining free Apache bands. We should examine it more carefully, Torque said. They found a sheltered position where they could maintain watch while studying the journal. The entries, written in a neat military hand, revealed a comprehensive strategy for the final pacification of Apache territories. Collection points, internment camp locations, and schedules for the forced removal of remaining bands were detailed with chilling precision. These are names of bands thought already captured or killed, Noya said, pointing to a list. But some still remain free. Torque recognized several names groups with whom his people had traded and sometimes intermarried. They do not know what awaits them. The weight of responsibility settled between them. Their journey had suddenly transformed from personal survival to something far more significant. The closest band on this list, Torque said, indicating the map, lies 3 days east of our current path. If the soldiers found this button here, Noya reasoned, they may already be close to that band. They looked at each other, the unspoken question hanging between them. Continue northward to safety, or divert their path to warn others? What would you have us do? Torque asked, though he already sensed her answer. Noya's chin lifted slightly, determination replacing fear in her eyes. If our positions were reversed, would you wish to be warned? The simplicity of the question contained its own answer. Torque nodded, a new respect for her courage warming his chest. Then we change our course, he decided. East to find this band, then north. As he spoke, a distant bugle call drifted on the wind-faint but unmistakable. The hunters were closer than they had realized. The stolen journal lay open between them as darkness fell, its pages illuminated by the small, carefully shielded fire. Torque studied the neat military handwriting with growing concern, translating the English words into concepts Noya could understand. The blue markings show planned movements of troops, he explained, tracing the lines with his finger. These red circles indicate Apache camps they have identified. Noya leaned closer, her shoulder pressing against his as she examined the detailed map. How do you read their markings so well? Torque was silent for a moment. Before the massacre, I served as scout for army negotiations, he finally admitted. I learned their writing, their map symbols, their military thinking. Understanding dawned in Noya's eyes. You were not with your village when the soldiers came because I was helping other soldiers, he finished, the old shame rising in his throat. I believed their promises of peace while they prepared for slaughter. The confession hung between them, Torque bracing himself for her judgment. Instead, Noya's hand covered his where it rested on the journal. You could not have known. The simple absolution, offered without hesitation, loosened something long knotted within him. He turned his attention back to the journal with renewed purpose. This details a coordinated operation, he continued. Multiple cavalry units moving simultaneously to capture or kill all remaining free Apache within the territory. When? Noya asked. Torque found the date in the commander's notations. 10 days from now, the new moon. They both understood the significance attacks under the new moon were standard military practice, using darkness to advantage against defenders. The nearest band is Sihane. Have no knowledge of this, Noya said, pointing to their location. On the map. Their camp lies here, in the shadow of 3 distinctive rock formations. You know this place? Torque asked. My mother's sister joined with their band. I visited as a child. Her expression grew determined. We must reach them before the soldiers do. The journal contained other critical information supply lines, rendezvous points, contingency plans, knowledge that could mean the difference between survival and destruction for dozens of Apache families. You risked everything to take this, Torque said, regarding Noya with new admiration. I did not fully understand what I was taking, she admitted. I heard officers discussing the plan night after night. When opportunity came to escape, I took the book I had seen the commander writing in most often. An instinct that may save many lives. Torque observed as they carefully refolded the journal. Their new reality settled between them. They were no longer simply 2 wounded people seeking personal sanctuary. They had become messengers carrying crucial warning to their scattered people. We will need to travel differently now, Torque said. No fire at night. Moving in darkness when possible. Noya nodded, understanding the increased danger. The Sihane may not welcome strangers easily. How will we approach? Your knowledge of their camp location gives us credibility, Torque reasoned, and the journal provides proof of our warning. They spent the remainder of the evening planning their approach, identifying landmarks from Noya's childhood memories and matching them to features on the military map. The task required close collaboration, their earlier awkwardness giving way to focused partnership. If we succeed in warning the Sihane, Noya asked eventually, what then? Do we continue north as planned? A question hung between them all. Decision point that would define their path forward. The journal shows other bands in danger, Torque said slowly, each one unaware of what approaches. Their eyes met in the dim firelight, mutual understanding passing between them. The journey north to safety would wait. They had been entrusted, whether by fate or the ancestors, with knowledge that must be shared. We warn as many as we can reach, Noya said, her voice soft but resolute. Torque nodded, feeling a sense of purpose he had thought lost forever in the ashes of his village. Together, as they prepared to sleep, dividing the night into watches, Torque noticed a subtle change in their interaction. The careful distance they had maintained had diminished, replaced by a natural coordination of movement. When Noya handed him his knife, their fingers touched longer than necessary. When he spread a blanket for her, she acknowledged the gesture, with a glance that carried meaning beyond gratitude. Sleep, he said. I take first watch. Wake me when the moon reaches the tall pine, she replied, settling onto her blanket. I will be here, he promised, the simple words carrying deeper significance. Then either acknowledged aloud. By midday of their 3rd day traveling eastward, they spotted the 3 distinctive rock formations Noya had described, tall pinnacles rising from the earth like ancient sentinels. Somewhere in their shadow lay the Sihane camp. We approach. With caution, Torque advised as they concealed TC Wigai in a densely wooded area. They will have sentries. From their packs, Torque retrieved a small leather pouch containing natural pigments, ochre, white clay, charcoal. Among Apache warriors, the application of war paint was both practical camouflage and spiritual preparation. We should mark ourselves properly, he said, opening the pouch. Not as warriors coming for battle, but as messengers carrying important news. Noya nodded understanding. In my mother's band, messengers wore white clay above the eyes to signify truth-speaking. Among my people, a single line of red across the cheekbones meant one carried words from the chiefs. Torque added, they decided to incorporate both traditions, creating a hybrid marking that might be recognized by various Apache bands. The preparation became an unexpectedly intimate ritual. Torque mixed the pigments with a small amount of bare fat, creating colors that would adhere to skin even through sweat or rain. "I will mark you first," he offered, the white clay mixture ready on his fingertips. Noya nodded, closing her eyes as he carefully drew the horizontal line above them. The touch was gentle yet firm, his calloused fingers moving with surprising delicacy across her face. He then applied the red ochre in a single stroke across each cheekbone, completing the messenger markings. "Now you," he said, handing her the pigments. Noya's touch was equally methodical as she applied the same patterns to his face. Their eyes met briefly during the process, an unspoken acknowledgement passing between them. They entered this danger as equals. Bound by shared purpose. With preparations complete, they reviewed their approach strategy one final time. "We must appear before their sentries openly, with empty hands raised," Torque explained. "No sudden movements. If challenged, I will speak first," Noya added. "I know something of their dialect, and my connection through my mother's sister may help establish trust." They moved toward the rock formations using natural cover, alert for any sign of sentries. Torque spotted the first watchman, a young warrior positioned on a rocky outcrop with clear views of the surrounding terrain. The sentry had already noticed them, but made no move to sound an alarm, instead observing their deliberate, open approach. "Remember," Torque murmured, "we come with respect, seeking audience with their leaders." When they reached the clearing, below the sentry's position, they stopped and raised their empty hands in the universal gesture of peaceful intent. The young warrior stood, bow ready but not drawn. "Who approaches the Tsaheni?" He called down in Apache. Noya stepped forward, slightly. "I am Noya, daughter of Senagwa, niece of Estsin, who joined with your band many seasons past. This is Torque, a warrior of the southern mountains. We come with urgent news for your chiefs." The sentry studied them, noting their messenger markings. After a moment's consideration, he gave a distinctive bird call, a signal to others hidden. In the surrounding forest. Within minutes, they were surrounded by warriors who emerged silently from concealed positions. Torque kept his hands visible, impressed by the discipline and skill of the Tsahani fighters. These were people who had successfully evaded capture for years. An older warrior approached, his face lined with experience, his bearing that of a war chief. "Estsin's people were taken by sickness many winters ago," he stated, his tone making it a challenge rather than a statement. "Yes," Noya replied steadily. "I alone survived. My mother was called Tazai, known for her skill with women's medicine and birthing songs." The war chief's expression remained impassive, but he nodded slightly. "What news brings you so urgently to our camp?" Torque spoke for the first time. "We carry warning of cavalry movements planned against your people. We have proof of their intentions." He gestured slowly toward the parfleche, where they had secured the journal. "May we show your leaders what we have brought?" The war chief studied them both intently, weighing threat against opportunity. Finally, he nodded. "You will be blindfolded. You will surrender any weapons. Then you may speak to our council." As cloth was wrapped around their eyes and Torque's knife was taken, he felt Noya's hand briefly touch, a gesture of reassurance in the momentary darkness. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The blindfolds were removed in a large hide shelter where the Tsaheni council had gathered 7 elders seated in a semicircle, their faces weathered by time and hardship. At their center sat an elderly woman whose bearing commanded immediate respect. Her white hair was bound with strips of red cloth, marking her as both medicine woman and chief. "I am Nalin," she stated simply. "My people say you bring warning." Torque inclined his head respectfully. "We do, honored one." At her nod, he retrieved the journal from the parfleche, which had been thoroughly examined by the warriors. As he placed it before the council, Noya explained its origin and significance in their dialect, her words careful and precise. The war chief they had met earlier, introduced as Kestrel, examined the journal with obvious suspicion. "You read the white man's markings?" he asked Torque. "I learned their language when I served as translator between our peoples," Torque acknowledged, "before I understood their true intentions." This admission caused murmurs among the council members, but Nalin raised her hand for silence. "Show us what threatens my people." With methodical care, Torque opened the journal to the maps detailing the planned operations. Using a small stick as pointer, he translated the military annotations, showing how multiple cavalry units would converge on the Sahane territory. "In just 7 days' time, their scouts have already located your general area," he explained, indicating markings on the map. "They plan to surround these rock formations before dawn on the night of no moon." Skepticism showed on several faces. Kestrel voiced what others clearly thought. Why would two strangers risk their lives to bring this warning? "What do you seek in return?" Before Torque could respond, Noya spoke. "I was held at one of their collection points," she said, her voice steady despite the painful admission. "I saw what awaits those captured. No Apache should suffer such fate." Her simple sincerity carried weight. Nalin studied her intently, then nodded almost imperceptibly. "Our scouts have reported increased cavalry movements," admitted one elder. "This matches what they say." "And yet," countered another, "this could be elaborate deception. The white soldiers have used Apache against Apache before." The debate continued while Torque and Naya waited patiently. Trust came neither quickly nor easily to people who had survived by suspicion. Finally, Nalin spoke again. "Bring the seeing glass." A warrior presented her with a small object wrapped in soft leather. Unwrapped, it revealed itself as a signal. "Mirror a polished piece of metal used by Apache for both practical communication and spiritual divination." Nalin held the mirror toward the smoke hole above, catching a beam of sunlight and directing it onto the dirt floor of the shelter. She studied the patterns of light, her expression revealing nothing. "The light speaks truth," she announced finally. "These messengers bring honest warning." The council's demeanor shifted subtly. Whatever they might question, none would challenge. Nalin's reading of the signs. "How much time before we must move?" Kestrel asked, the question itself an acceptance of their warning. "To be safely away, no more than 2 days," Torque advised. "They approach from south and west. Your best path lies northward into the higher mountains." "We have children, elders," an older man pointed out. "We cannot move as quickly as 2 messengers. And we have cached food and supplies that cannot be abandoned," added another. Nlin raised her hand again, silencing the concerns we have faced. "Such challenges before, we will do what must be done." She turned to Torque and Noya. "You have brought us valuable warning at great risk. The Sahane remember those who stand as friends." The council disbanded to organize the camp's evacuation. Kestrel remained with Torque and Noya, examining the journal's maps more closely. "Our scouts reported cavalry already moving from the south," he said, pointing to a location approximately 15 miles distant. "They come earlier than your map shows." Torque frowned. "The commander may have changed plans after discovering the journal missing." "Then we have less time than thought," Kestrel concluded grimly. Outside the council shelter, activity had already begun. Women efficiently packing essential items, men dismantling shelters, children gathering their few possessions. The discipline and speed impressed Torque. "You have done this before," he observed. "Many times," Kestrel acknowledged. "It is how we remain free." As they watched the preparations, Noya touched Torque's arm. "We should help," she said. "Then continue our own journey." Torque hesitated, studying the map again. "If the cavalry is already approaching from the south, perhaps we can create a diversion. Draw them away from the Sahane escape route." Noya considered this. 2 riders, Moving openly while the band travels hidden, it would give them better chance to reach the mountains safely. Torque confirmed. Their eyes met, mutual understanding passing between them. Such a plan carried significant risk, placing themselves directly in the cavalry's path. I will go. Alone, Torque decided. You should travel with the band. Noya's expression hardened. We are in this together, she stated firmly. I will not be separated now. Dawn found Torque and Noya preparing for their dangerous mission, while the Tsehane broke camp with practiced efficiency. Kestrel had assigned 2 warriors to guide the band north through hidden mountain passes, while the main force of cavalry was distracted. Our diversion must be convincing, Torg explained as they readied to see Wagai. We need to appear as a small group of Apache fleeing eastward. Noya nodded, securing their few remaining supplies. The cavalry will pursue what they can see, rather than searching for what they cannot. Their plan was daring in its simplicity. While the Tsehane moved silently northward through dense forest, Torque and Noya would create a visible trail heading east, drawing any approaching soldiers away from the band's true escape route. Kestrel approached, leading a cavalry horse with military saddles still attached. Our scouts captured this from a patrol 2 days ago, he explained. The rider did not survive to report back. Torch examined the horse, a strong bay gelding trained for endurance. This will help convince them they follow a larger group, he observed. The animal would leave distinctive tracks easily identified as belonging to the cavalry. Take this also, Kestrel said, offering a small rawhide pouch. Smoke medicine. When burned, it creates signals visible from great distance. Noya accepted the gift with proper ceremony. May it confuse our enemies and protect our friends. With final preparations complete, they bid farewell to the Tsehane leaders. Nalin approached, her ancient eyes studying them both. You choose a dangerous path, she observed. The only path open to us, Torque replied. The old woman nodded slowly. I have seen such before too, who walk as one, their spirits aligned by the ancestors. She touched their foreheads in blessing. Return to us when you can. There will be place for you among the Tsehane. The offer of adoption into the band was significant, a recognition of kinship that transcended blood ties. Both Torque and Noya acknowledged the honor with appropriate respect. As that Tsehane disappeared into the northern forest with remarkable stealth. Torque and Noya mounted their horses and headed east, making no attempt to hide their trail. Torque rode TC Wagai, while Noya handled the captured cavalry mount with surprising skill. My father raised horses before the troubles came, she explained, noting his unspoken question. I learned to ride before I could walk. They traveled through open country for nearly an hour, deliberately leaving clear signs of passage-disturbed earth, broken branches, even occasional personal items that might be recognized as a patch. From a ridge overlooking the southern approach, they spotted what they had been both expecting and dreading, a dust cloud marking the advance of mounted troops. Torque estimated at least 20 riders moving in formation. They come faster than we thought, he observed grimly. We must begin the diversion now. Using the smoke medicine Kestrel had provided, Noya created a small but visible signal fire, then quickly extinguished it, exactly as Apache scouts would communicate the sighting of enemies. They repeated this process at 2 more locations, creating the impression of multiple lookouts tracking the cavalry's approach. Now we ride east, Torque decided. Visible enough to be spotted, but not so obvious as to raise suspicion. They maintained a steady pace, allowing occasional glimpses of themselves from distant vantage points. Behind them, the cavalry column changed direction, taking the bait. They follow, Noya confirmed after checking their back trail. All of them. Torque nodded, satisfaction mingling with concern. Their plan was working, but they now had 20 armed soldiers in pursuit with only a modest head start. "We lead them through the canyon lands," he said, pointing to a maze-like formation in the distance. "There we can create confusion, perhaps slip away." The strategy was sound, but execution proved more challenging than anticipated. The cavalry pushed their mounts hard, gradually closing the distance. By midday, Torque could hear the faint commands of the officers urging their men. "Forward! They gain on us," Noya observed, her voice steady despite the danger. "We let them come a little closer," Torque replied. "Make them believe capture is imminent. Then we separate briefly and rejoin in the canyon." It was a dangerous refinement of their plan, but necessary. If they simply fled at top speed, the cavalry might grow suspicious of the obvious trail and send scouts to search other directions, potentially discovering the Sehane's true route as they approached the canyon entrance. Torque gave Noya final instructions. "Create one more smoke signal on the eastern ridge. I will leave clear tracks heading into the main canyon. We meet at the fork marked by the standing rock." Their hands clasped briefly, a warrior's grip of mutual trust. No further words were needed. Each knew their role and the risks it entailed. "Ride well," Torque said simply. "And you," Noya replied, her eyes holding his for a moment before she turned her mount toward the ridge. The canyon system swallowed Torque like the throat of some great earth beast. Towering walls of red sandstone blocked the sun, creating a labyrinth of shadow and light. He pushed Teswigai hard, leaving unmistakable tracks in the sandy bottom while listening for pursuit. The cavalry had split forces, the main body following his trail, while a smaller detachment pursued Noya toward the ridge. The strategy was working, but the margin for error had vanished. If either of them failed to reach the rendezvous point, capture or worse awaited. At the first fork in the canyon, Torque veered left, then dismounted to create false tracks continuing straight. A simple deception might buy precious minutes. Back in the saddle, he navigated the narrowing passage, Tessie Ligai's hooves echoing against stone walls. The rendezvous point appeared ahead, a distinctive pillar of rock standing alone in a small clearing where 3 canyon branches met. No sign of Noya yet. Torque positioned himself in shadow, watching and waiting. Minutes stretched painfully. Behind him, shouts echoed as the cavalry discovered his false trail. Ahead, silence from the direction Noya should approach. Doubt crept in like a chill wind. Had she been captured? Lost? The thought of her in soldiers' hands made his chest tighten with unfamiliar intensity. A scatter of pebbles from above drew his attention. Noya appeared on a narrow ledge 20 feet up the canyon wall, signaling silently. She had found a higher path safer, but requiring her to abandon the cavalry horse. Smart. Torque guided Teswigai beneath the ledge. Noya dropped lightly. Behind him on the horse, her arms circling his waist for balance. The simple contact carried unexpected comfort amid danger. "The soldiers?" he asked quietly. "4 followed me," she replied, her breath warm against his ear. "I led them into a box canyon. They'll find exit eventually, but not soon." He nodded approval and urged Teswigai forward into the narrowest canyon branch, a passage barely wide enough for a single rider. The walls rose hundreds of feet on either side, preventing any flanking maneuver by their pursuers. "There's a way through to the northern valley," Noya explained. "My uncle showed me as a child. Few know it exists." They rode in tense silence, Teswigai steady pace taking them deeper into the labyrinth. Behind them, occasional shouts confirmed the cavalry's continued confusion in the canyon system. The passage narrowed further until rocky walls brushed their legs on both sides. Then abruptly, the canyon ended in a sheer rock face. "There," Noya pointed to a dark opening at the base of the wall, a cave entrance partially hidden by fallen boulders. They dismounted, Torque eyeing the cave with skepticism. "You're certain there's passage through?" "Yes," Noya confirmed. "Though we must go on foot. Tessewigai cannot follow." The decision was painful but necessary. The loyal horse had carried them far, but would now become a final diversion. Torque removed his saddle and bridle, whispering thanks and instructions in the animal's ear before sending him back toward their pursuers with a sharp slap on the flank. "He will find his way to freedom," Noya assured him, understanding his attachment to the horse. They entered the cave just as distant hoofbeats announced the cavalry's approach. Inside, darkness engulfed them. Noya moved with surprising confidence, leading Torque deeper by touch alone. "There are markings," she explained, her fingers finding carved symbols in the rock wall. "Ancient ones left by those who came before. My uncle taught me their meaning." The passage twisted downward, the air growing cooler and damper. Torque followed closely, trusting Noya's memory and the wisdom of her ancestors. Suddenly, her hand gripped his arm, stopping him. "Listen." Behind them, voices echoed soldiers had found the cave entrance and were following. "How far to the exit?" Torque asked urgently. "Not far, but—" Noya hesitated. "There's a challenge ahead. A narrow underwater passage. We must swim beneath rock to reach the other side." The revelation was unwelcome, but not surprising. The ancestors often protected their most valuable escape routes with such tests of courage. 2 soldiers at least, Torque noted, the voices growing closer. "We have no choice." They moved forward until dim light revealed ancient petroglyphs, covering the walls stylized figures, animals, and symbols of power. At their feet, a dark pool stretched into blackness, disappearing beneath the rock ceiling. "The passage is short," Noya assured him. "Count slowly to 10 while swimming forward. Then up." The soldiers' lanterns cast approaching shadows on the tunnel walls. No time for hesitation. "Together," Torque said, clasping Noya's hand. They submerged simultaneously, pushing into the underwater tunnel. Cold blackness enveloped them as they swam blindly forward, guided only by the smooth stone beneath their searching hands. Torque counted heartbeats, fighting the instinct to surface where no air existed. His lungs burned. 8, 9. His hand found. Emptiness above the ceiling had disappeared. They surfaced together, gasping in the dim light of a new chamber. Behind them, shouts of confusion echoed from the soldiers discovering the underwater barrier. Few would risk such a blind passage, for now they had escaped. Dawn painted the eastern, sky in hues of pink and gold as Torque and Noya emerged from the hidden canyon exit. They climbed a nearby ridge, their clothes still damp from the underground passage, and surveyed the landscape below Dot in the distance. Cavalry units moved. In frustration, their search pattern betraying confusion and growing disorganization. Far to the north, no sign of pursuit suggested that Sahane he had escaped successfully. Their diversion had worked. "They are safe," Noya said softly, relief evident in her voice. Torque nodded, unexpected emotion tightening his throat. 4. The first time since the massacre of his village, he had protected rather than merely survived. The sensation was both foreign and familiar, a part of himself he had thought forever lost. They settled on the ridge, sheltered by a weathered juniper, to rest and plan their next move. The military journal lay between them, its pages containing information that could save more lives. "The Mescalero band is closest," Torque observed, studying the map. 3 days' journey west. "They too are marked for the soldiers' attention." Noya's expression grew thoughtful. "And after them?" "The Chiricahua to the south, then others." He looked up, meeting her eyes directly. "It could be many weeks of travel, dangerous at every step." The question hung unspoken between them. Was she willing to continue this path of resistance rather than seeking the safety they had originally planned? Noya's hand covered his where it rested on the map. "Then we had better start walking," she said simply. The directness of her answer, free from hesitation or fear, stirred something profound in Torqua's chest. This woman who had entered his life broken and near death now stood as his equal, in courage and determination. "It will not be easy," he cautioned, though he already knew her resolve. "Few worthy things are," she replied, the corner of her mouth lifting slightly, a smile more precious for its rarity. They gathered their few remaining possessions, ready to begin the long journey westward. As they prepared to leave the ridge, Torque paused, looking back at the sunrise illuminating the landscape. From this vantage point, what the Apache called a sunrise mesa, the world below seemed vast yet comprehensible, dangerous yet navigable. "When I found you by the riverbed," he said quietly, "I had no purpose beyond my own survival. I wandered like a ghost among the living." Noya stood beside him, her shoulder brushing his as they faced the dawn together. "And I had lost hope that any goodness remained in this world." The admission cost her, he knew. To acknowledge such despair was to reveal the depths from which she had climbed. "Perhaps the ancestors guided our meeting," Torque suggested, the words emerging from a place of renewed spiritual connection he had thought forever close to him. "Perhaps," Noya agreed. Then, with characteristic directness, "Or perhaps, too, broken people recognized in each other the possibility of becoming whole again." The simplicity of her assessment struck him with the force of truth. He turned to face her fully, seeing not the wounded woman he had rescued, but the strong, determined partner who now stood before him. Without thought or plan, his hand rose to gently touch her cheek, the first such contact he had initiated without practical purpose. Noya did not pull away. Instead, her eyes held his, unflinching and clear. "We have a long road ahead," she said softly. "Yes," he agreed, understanding she meant more than their physical journey. "But we need not walk it alone." Her hand covered his where it rested against. Her face, a gesture of acceptance that required no further words. Whatever lay ahead, danger, hardship, uncertainty, they would face it together. Two spirits aligned by circumstance and choice. As they descended the ridge side by side, Torque felt the weight of grief he had carried for so long begin to shift, not disappear, never that, but transform into something that could be carried differently. The sorrow remained, as did the memories of those lost, but alongside had grown something new, purpose, connection, and the first fragile tendrils of hope behind them. The sunrise mesa stood witness to their departure, one chapter ending, another beginning. Ahead lay the unknown path they had chosen together. Neither healing nor happiness came guaranteed, but for the first time since the world had shattered for each of them, both seemed possible.